it's Jeanette, the Not So Perfect Mom, and I'm doing my February reading wrap up. So this month I finished 6 books. I read a total of 1,679 pages, which sounds like not as much as last month, but there were several nonfictions which seemed to take me a little bit longer to read. I don't know if everyone's like that or it's just me being super slow. But the first book I finished was actually the last book from January's reading wrap-up, and that was An Unquiet Mind by K. Redfield Jamison, and I finished the last 114 pages of that book. And in that, if you don't remember, is her memoir of what it's like to be in the psychiatry field with a mental illness. She has bipolar disorder, and she talks about her struggle diagnosing herself or letting herself be diagnosed while diagnosing others with the same thing. So it was very interesting. It was a little bit depressing, but I mean, it was an interesting book. I definitely recommend it. The next book I read was an audio book, and it was a historical romance, and it is the last book in Tessa Dare's Castles Ever After series, and it's called Do You Want to Start a Scandal? This is the 4th book in this series, but it's the 5th book in the Spindle Cove series, and I have not started the Spindle Cove series, but I absolutely adore Tessa Dare's writing. Her characters are always so strong-willed. The men are always slightly annoying, but in the end you kind of enjoy that. And this one was about I forget the main character's name. She is at a party, and she is trying to warn this Marquess, how do you say that word? Anyway, she's trying to warn him that her mother is going to try to set her up with him. So in the process of doing this, they end up in a compromising situation in the library, and while they're hiding to avoid the people that come in, these people are having a lover's tryst, and her mother and his father come in and think that it's him and her, and they're of course told he must marry her, and her quest is to figure out who these lovers were so that she is not forced into a marriage with a man that she thinks is an arrogant jerk. So it's so good. There's a little bit of a twist in it when it comes to his occupation, what he does. I enjoyed that part of it, and I enjoyed how spunky and sassy she is. Tessa Dare is obviously she's a great writer, and I definitely recommend this series. And it's the Castles Ever After series, and I'm fixing to start the Spindle Cove series, so I'm going to tell you about that one too. The next book I read was a kid's book, and it was a library book, so I don't actually have it with me to show you that either. And it's Spirit of the Cedar People by Chief Leloska, and it is just really beautifully illustrated stories from this I guess the tribe Cedar People. I'm not so much know so much about the history of the thing, but each story was beautifully illustrated and told some witty story, and I will put a picture. I always point up here, but it's not, but I'll put a picture in so you can see what it was. The next book I read was Lock and Mooring, which is this book, and it's by Heather W. Petty, and this is a Sherlock and Moriarty tale, only Moriarty is a girl, or unless they're referring to her father, but it's a young adult book, and I enjoyed it. I don't know that I would continue with it because Sherlock and Locke and Maury were not really likable characters. I don't know. I think the girl, Moriarty, was very cold. She was very, I don't know. You just didn't relate to her very well. Anyway, what the story is that they meet in school, and she thinks he's a weird guy who does science experiments in the basement, which he is, and there is some killings that start happening in their town, and they're forced together to do some kind of assignment, and they come across the crime scene, and of course, Sherlock wants to investigate. He wants to go see what's going on. So he drags Maury into it. And there is some question as to what happened to Maury's mother. And she passed away. She died. She had, I think, cancer of some sort. And her father is a police officer. And he has fallen into this deep depression after her mother's death and become a drunk and abusive towards her siblings. And she's trying to investigate with Sherlock these killings without her father finding out, because of course he's a policeman and he wouldn't want her anywhere near them. Plus she's dealing with his abusiveness that's escalating towards her brothers and herself. And it's all about how these murders interact with her life, because she's tied to them. She doesn't realize it, but she's tied to them. I can't go any further than that, or I will be giving definite spoilers. Now, I did enjoy it. It was a pretty good, quick read. It was just that the characters were really hard to like. I don't know. But anyway, it was good. The next book was a really big nonfiction, and this is Drawing Down the Moon, and you can see I really liked a lot of this book. And this is by Margaret Adler, and this is Witches, Druids, Goddess Worshippers, and Other Pagans in America Today. What I did is I actually took this big old tome and I got the audiobook on Audible, and I took it to work so that I could listen to it while I'm at work, which I really actually enjoy being able to sit in the back sometimes and listen to audiobooks. So I worked my way through a lot of that book at work, just kind of jotting down notes of what I wanted to pick up on and what I wanted to research later. And this is basically a history of all things pagan. Like, she delves into all the little different branches, all the different little covens and churches and stuff. The Covenant of the Goddess, the Druids, the neo-paganism, the feminist movement, the gay fairies movement. So many things that I did not know about. There is so much history in paganism and goddess worshipping and that I had never ever heard of. I guess because I wasn't quite born that far back. A lot of the movement was in the early 60s and 70s, it seems, and it kind of is still going strong. There's still a big movement, but it's not as flagrant as some of the other older groups that you read about in this book. And a lot of the resources are kind of outdated. It's a little sad not being able to actually find some of the information that you come across in the book, but it's still a very interesting book all the same. And that book was 672 pages, and the last 150, I think, were just the resources that she used to write the book. So that was really fascinating. And then the last book that I read was Last Child in the Woods by Richard Louv, L-O-U-V, Louv. I don't remember how it was pronounced. And this is about the author says that children today aren't in nature. They aren't allowed to run wild and free, kind of like we were in the earlier eras. And that children are developing what he calls a nature deficit, nature deficit disorder. And it's not a technical term. It's not anything that's really in psychology or anything, but it's basically that children are suffering because they're not, able to go out into nature, and that nature could be a cure for ADHD. Sorry about that. My camera cut off. It goes into a lot of details and reasoning behind why children aren't able to go out into nature as much as they used to. Of course, there's safety issues. There is a lot of restrictions. Like, if our kids were to go into the neighbor's yard and the neighbor got upset because they were trampling their grass, or they didn't want kids in their tree because if the kid falls then they could get sued, or there's a lot of restrictions placed on kids and their ability to go out and participate in the natural world. And it advocates for more unstructured free time and to allow children to have, you know, the access to get out there and get dirty and get muddy and play in the grass, and to have, you know, that bored moment where they actually are like, Mom, I'm bored, and don't put them in front of a TV, but say, go outside and find something to do. Even if they whine and cry, when they go outside and they find a playmate or something, and they, you know, come up with all kinds of creative games that they play. I think it's harder for our children's generation to do that. My kids definitely are lacking in that, and for me, the book really picks up on that and picks up on the why, and it doesn't give you a whole lot of how-tos. It doesn't really help you figure out what to do to remedy the situation. It just discusses what it is and what his thoughts are, and there's a lot of historical and nature ecology type thing in it. I do plan to unhaul the book afterwards, because while it was interesting and it did bring up some valid points, it didn't have anything in it that would help move it forward. So anyway, that is all of the books that I have read in February, and if you'd like to sneak peek to March, I am currently reading Devil in the White City by Eric Larson, which is about the the World's Fair that was held in Chicago and the serial killer H.H. Holmes. And I love this as far as that I'm on chapter... there's no chapter numbers. I don't know what chapter this is. I'm on part 2. And it has already mentioned my hometown where I was born and raised. So that was kind of a little bit of a fun fact for me. And I can't wait to finish reading that. But anyway, let me know what you're reading down below. If you've read any of these, if you have any book recommendations for me, feel free to chat, and I'll come visit your channel if you've got a video. I like to watch reading wrap-ups too, so hit me up down below, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!